back to another Shark Show. Today we're going to dive deeper into the candidates for mayor and city council. We went over their bios a little bit in episode 49. So if you want to go back and look at episode 49, please go back and watch that. But today we're going to start with Jim Jarrett for mayor and look at his platform. And on his platform, he calls it an infrastructure crisis, which is, what we've been talking about here on Blue Shark for a long time. Is there is a definite city-wide infrastructure crisis, from wastewater to 377, traffic, things like that. So what else does he say about infrastructure?
He talks about the moratorium that's currently in effect and how we're possibly looking at a citywide moratorium. Right now it's just on the east side of town, but if things don't change soon, then it's possibly going to be the entire city. So that's another thing he addresses in there. And I know he's been to several council meetings and talked to the council members about these issues, and he's got some experience behind him that would be put to great use in this area as well.
Yeah, Courtney, you brought up Jim's experience, and a lot of what he did through his career, primarily in operations and boardroom level positions, is, identifying redundancies, seeing where the process can be improved, coming in and making the types of changes. And I think somewhere on his website he says, the types of changes that we need here in Granbury.
And you take that experience of the boardroom and move that over to all these, the RTC meetings, the UTP, all the things that need to be done. And that would fit pretty good on some of this infrastructure and the problems that we in Granbury are facing.
Yeah, because you have to be able to work with all these different entities at one time to get everything to flow together simultaneously for it to work to your advantage for the city. Right,
and to go along with the infrastructure, the traffic issues, he also has on his platform business and economy. Yeah. Meaning, we've got to make it a little bit more simple, less regulations for businesses to come in here to Granbury without all the headaches that they're having.
Yeah, and talking to a lot of shop owners who, sadly are scared to come forward publicly, and it's a shame that they fear that, but a lot of them have a really hard time when it comes to opening a business and, dealing with code enforcement and all this stuff. There's a lot of miscommunication, redundancies, getting the runaround, and that's the type of stuff that he says he can come in and fix.
Yeah, and I've had personal friends come to Granbury and try to have their business established here and then wind up and leave because there's just too much red tape. It's not worth the hassle, and so they go to a more business-friendly city.
And another part of his platform is transparency, which is huge. That's what we talk about all the time on Blue Shark Show, is transparency, right?
Yeah, transparency goes a long way. It builds trust and a relationship with the citizens that you're representing. When your citizens feel like they can trust their elected officials, you're going to just have a much better relationship with them, and you're going to be a more effective leader that way as well.
When you look at transparency, it's not the fact that they may be trying to hide something. Well, sometimes they might, but it's the fact that you're doing all this work, but nobody's mentioning it to the public.
Right, and you're doing this work for the citizens, so wouldn't you want them to know what's going on behind the scenes?
If you are doing the work, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So transparency is a huge issue also. So if you look at Jim Jarrett's platform, looks pretty good, looks pretty solid, looks conservative. If you want to check out Jim a little bit further, go to jimjarrett.com and you can look at his website on your own and decide for yourself. We also have Charles Nangle, goes by Charlie, and he's another candidate for mayor.
And Charlie, we talked about this in one of the last episodes. He's retired military, fighter pilot, Top Gun instructor. Pretty impressive in the military community for sure.
And some of Charlie Nangle's platform is, for the city, he would like to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, which is good. And now, remember that, the mayor can't do things on their own. They have to have the city council and vote and do everything.
Yeah, and he also talks about certain things like banning critical race theory and the Second Amendment sanctuary city. And these are all great things. And, this isn't something that the mayor alone can do just by themselves, but this is clearly an intention to work with the council members to try to bring about some of these positive changes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and something else that Charlie brings up is funding 2 full-time fire stations, getting rid of the volunteer system at least 2 of our locations. Yeah, within the city limits.
And he also, speaks about TxDOT and helping with 377 and moving that project forward. Once again, problems with infrastructure, and all these candidates see, that seems to be a major theme with all 3 candidates.
Right, and he also talks about working with other cities that are similar to Granbury and scope and size, and how they've been able to move projects forward. That shows a willingness to work with others to try to make change happen as well.
Right, and later on he speaks about planning too. That we should be planning now for 5 or 10 years, which some of that has fallen by the wayside. Hence our problem with all the infrastructure, right?
Right.
So looking at Charles Nangle, if you want more information to look and decide for yourself, once again, you can go to Charlie for Granbury on Facebook and look at some of the things he has posted there. And the final candidate to reach out to Blue Shark is Joni Keyes. And Joni Keyes has somewhat of a platform on Facebook.
Yeah, and she's a local business owner, so she has that experience and that perspective coming into this election as a small business owner, and the impacts of COVID and how local government has really affected a lot of the small businesses in our area.
Right, and she also gets into the infrastructure aspect like all the other candidates do.
Yeah.
And she talks about, the elected leaders haven't delivered on the infrastructure, and she's exactly right, they haven't.
Yeah, and Joni mentioned those personnel changes. I think one of the big changes that needs to be made is, Chris Kaufman, the city manager. We've had a lot of issues with him over the years, and I think people are starting to get tired of it. And unfortunately, he is tied in pretty tight with the current power structure on the council, but we've got a good opportunity to change that.
That have been there for years and years and years, and have watched these problems just surface to the top, just like the infrastructure sewage problem, right?
Right.
Yeah. And as a business owner, small business owner, we hear this quite a bit from people contacting Blue Shark on how difficult it is to work with the city and get their businesses thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another part of her platform that she talks about is transparency, which again, we are huge on here at Blue Shark. Transparency is a must-have in any elected or appointed official. And she talks about personnel changes. And when you get into newly elected officials, a lot of times the appointed officials that work for the city or the county, whichever entity they may be elected to, a lot of times those appointed officials are changed as well.
So her platform, Joni's platform, similar to the others as far as infrastructure and transparency and a couple of other things. So if you want to look at Joni Keyes information, you can find her on Facebook at Joni for Mayor and look up her Facebook and see what she's about. These are the 3 candidates that reached out to Blue Shark. So we are giving out the information that they're relaying to us and making it public, so everybody can look and choose for themselves on what candidate they'd like to vote for. And now for the candidates for place 5, we have Cathy Reedy.
Yeah.
And she's concerned about the infrastructure. Sent an email to us about, what she would like to see happen. And she used an example of the villas on Quiet Cove off the loop that couldn't open up because of sewage issues, right?
Yeah, those have been sitting there for quite a while, and I know at one point they were trying to lease those units out in preparation for the city to tie on their sewer, but the city can't do it right now because they don't have the capacity for another 200-something toilets.
Yeah, they were already working on it, getting a lot of the apartments in those buildings pre-leased. So basically, as soon as these are ready, it's yours, you've got this apartment. But with this moratorium in place and no sewage, it's kind of hard to guarantee these people a spot and let them know when they can actually move in.
Right, and she works in healthcare, and she talks about, she's, been involved with crisis management, and she knows how to prioritize and set the priorities of the city on where they need to be, and infrastructure is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and again, it's good to see most of these candidates come out and say, look, guys, we have a problem. Because there is. These problems are not small and they can't be ignored anymore.
And Cathy also seems to be concerned with the volunteered versus paid fire department and how that needs to be addressed and looked into.
Another thing Cathy talks about is the work that needs to be done in and around 377, which, again, it's a very common theme in this election.
So if you'd like to look at some of Cathy's platform and what she stands for, you can see her on Cathy Reedy on Facebook. And please, once again, ask questions of these candidates. Go look at their Facebook pages. Call them up, email them, whatever you need to do to get more information so you're comfortable about voting for any of these candidates. And another candidate for place 5 is Richard Hafes, and he's reached out to us, and he also has a Facebook and a platform listed on his Facebook. Richard and his wife moved to Granbury a couple years ago because it was a great place and he felt it was a special place to be.
Yeah, and one of the things he talks about in his platform is keeping Granbury special, and he says he loves how friendly everybody is here and just the community and all that happy-go-lucky stuff.
Yeah, and he's been involved in the community. He's been to the city council meetings. He's served on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So he's got some experience there as far as the infrastructure issues that the city's been dealing with. So.
Right, and he also talks about being responsible with city funds, keeping the property tax rate as low as practical, and that's sound good government. Hopefully everybody wants to do that, but we also need to make sure our infrastructure is in place and caught up.
Yeah, and he also talks about maintaining a partnership with local businesses. So here again, we see this theme of local businesses here in the city and making sure that this is a business-friendly town for them.
And he talks about working with the chamber, and hopefully that is a step for some of these candidates coming in, that they would work with the chamber to make it a lot easier as far as the chamber pushing for less regulations, less hassle, make it easier for these businesses to come in.
Yeah, that's a change from the chamber I'd really like to see.
Right, so maybe he can work that out, but he has that in his platform. And also, Richard talks about honoring conservative Texas values, courtesy, hard work, personal responsibility.
Yeah, so again, I'm really excited to see 7 different candidates running in this city election just for 2 seats. That, I think, is a good sign, and it's good to see all these people wanting to get engaged. A lot of the theme for 5 out of the 7 candidates is, we've got some serious infrastructure problems. We're not treating businesses right. We've got maybe some issues with transparency and, several other things that I think have been ignored by the current power structure.
Yeah, it's really good to see these people stepping up. It's a great way to affect change on the local level. And a lot of, like you said, a lot of the themes that we see on these platforms, there are a lot of conservative-based principles, a lot of issues that need to be addressed, that they're all willing to work with the council members and other entities to make the change happen that needs to happen, that's been needed to happen for a while now.
You're right, this is an exciting time for Granbury. We've got 5 of the 7 candidates that reached out to us and are concerned about the information they're putting out, saying, look, there needs to be a change. Infrastructure is probably one of the most, the biggest issue for everybody, except, like you said, 2 people. So please look at each candidate, go to their website, go to their Facebook, call them, talk to them individually, because once you sit down and talk to them, you'll know where they stand on the issues that are of your concern, the citizens.
Guys, we appreciate all the support. If y'all want to help Blue Shark financially, you can purchase some of the merch, which is available on blueshark.media. There we've got hats like you see Mike and myself wearing, these tumblers we've got, and Courtney is wearing one of our t-shirts as well.
And once again, this is Blue Shark, looking out for you, the citizens of Hood County, shining a light on your elected and appointed officials. Shark Show out.